What happens when you give a media personality and a sex therapist a podcast? You get Spill the Tea, a bold, unfiltered space where no topic is off limits, from sex and relationships to the messy, hilarious, and heartbreaking realities of life. Will Nash and Maria Orrego serve up real talk with expert insight, hot takes, and a whole lot of tea.
But I think the reason why this topic came up, sorry, as I'm fixing my thing. I think the reason why this topic came up for me was because I'm noticing that there's like two things happening. There's people talking about like the unfortunate part that they don't know anything about intimacy or that they feel very lost within intimacy and sex. And then there's the other part where I hear parents asking me like, when do I have the sex talk? What does that mean? What do I tell my children? And then like the school board, and like we're seeing that even in politics, right? We're seeing it down like in our neighbors in the US, and then like our Canadian like new stuff that's happening. What are the school boards going to do? And what are they going to teach about sex education and sex health and sexuality, right? So it's such a big topic.
It's interesting because as you're saying this in my mind, and obviously I know you obviously have confidentiality in your practice, like legally, but it's like, I'm like, I wonder if like these are conversations that probably come up in your practice, but also, you know, I know you're involved with the school and with your kid's school too. So I'm sure like, and you're a mom, and I would assume you have mom friends and dad friends and the whole thing. So these are sort of ongoing conversations that, I don't know, I kind of wonder, like back in the 90s, back in the early 2000s, like were parents even open to having these sort of conversations? Like I can't picture my mom in like 1992 waiting to pick me up from school, gabbing to another parent about, you know, so when should we tell Willie about the bird and the bees? Might have been too late, right?
Oh my gosh, the bird and the bees, which never made any sense. I don't know who the hell decided that the bird and the bees was like a good idea, but that made no sense at all. Like, I'm still trying to figure out what the hell that means.
I feel like there was like shows like back in the day that, I mean, would have been before our time, but definitely not before our parents' time, that was how they would sort of have those conversations. And whenever you have the topic of, you know, parents talking about their kids, but sexuality, intimacy, you know, male and female body parts and things like that, my mind, I don't know why, but my mind always goes back to American Pie. With Eugene Levy having that like talking to his son before he goes off to, I think, college, right? No, he was graduating high school. I don't know, but like, it's like, okay, I just love Eugene Levy, right? And I love those American Pie movies, which now probably wouldn't get made because it'd be canceled for half the things that they said and talked about.
I think so. I think those would be like fully on the prohibited list of like what is appropriate and not appropriate. But I love that you mentioned that too. Like he had the conversation or the sex talk when he was graduating high school, which is also like years too late to be having that conversation with someone, right, with your children. But I have heard that. And this I'll say, like, I've had friends of mine tell me that they have had the sex talk with their parents when they like turned 18. And like me knowing my friends, I'm like, you've been sexually active for years. And they're like, I know. And it was the most awkward conversation to have with my parents that when I'm 18, they're like coming and talking to me about this thing that I've known for years. But there was never that conversation. Did you ever get the sex talk?
No, it's kind of funny because I do not remember getting a sex talk from either one of my parents. Like, I feel like my parents, like my mom, it was definitely the more like the louder of the two parents, the more outgoing of the parents. My dad was really, this might surprise you, you know, that I came out of these people, but my dad was really shy and very private and quiet and all these sort of things, right? And it's like, I just don't know that either one of them would have, I don't know, like, I'm not even necessarily blaming them, if that makes sense, but I feel like I don't know that a lot of parents still do. And I mean, I also, if I'm being honest with you, especially at that time, if my mom or my dad would have probably tried to have that sex talk with me, whether I knew anything about it, was going to figure it out later, I think I would have been like, okay, no, like I'm walking out of this room. Like, I don't want to hear this from you. Like, I wouldn't have wanted to hear them say the word sex. Like, But you know what's so funny? Can I tell you something? I've been actually dying to tell you this, but I wanted to wait to tell you on a podcast. And this is almost, I might blush telling you the story.
Have you been hiding tea from me?
No, I haven't been hiding tea from you. But what I will tell you, and this is a traumatizing moment from my childhood, I remember at one point being in my parents' bedroom, just like, talking to one of them sitting on their bed, right? They weren't in bed or anything, and looking back at my mom's bookshelf. And I looked over to the left, and that book that you have behind you, The Joy of Sex, was in her bookcase. And I was like, oh, my parents had sex? Like, and so whenever that book stares me right in the face, and I've been wanting to tell you this for, months at this point, right? It just takes me back to that traumatic childhood moment where my mom had a book on sex. So that means my mom actually had sex.
Oh my God, that is hilarious. I love that you've waited this long, that this book has been like on my shelf for months, and you just like your trauma is staring you in the face.
And honestly, if I can be honest with you, if we were to stop this recording right now and you were to say to me, Will, could you name like 6 books that were behind me? I would only be able to name one. And it's called The Joy of Sex. And I just remember it. I remember I don't know if it's actually the same book, but I have a weird memory for things from long ago. And I feel like it is the same book. I don't know how old that book is, but if that's like an updated one that's been around for a long time, it's probably, oh, this is gross. It's probably the same book that my mom probably still has on her bookshelf, which again, dry heave, but
Oh my God, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a break so that Will can go throw up and come back. I love how that's coming up for you right now. And I don't mean to laugh, but that we've all had those weird experiences, right? When we like realize, oh my God, our parents have sex? Like, what?
No, my parents haven't had sex since they had my sisters. Like they literally haven't had it in over 40 years, right?
Of course. And even during that time, they didn't actually have sex. It was
no,
just like a miraculous thing.
I was a Cabbage Patch Kid, right? I was just born in the patch.
Exactly. Or like this, what was it? The stork that brings the baby to the door, right? Like all our cartoons had that before. Oh my gosh.
Where someone just dropped me off in a basket on the front doorstep and they decided to embrace me, right?
That's how
this is unrelated, but that book, like I'm stuck on that book. I'm stuck on this trauma. Is that book, like, has that book been around for a while, or is that a new book with just coincidentally the same title? I love that you're pulling. I'm like,
no, I don't know. Hold on.
I'm like backing further away from my camera as you hold that book. Like, I'm almost afraid of that book.
I'll take it down. So this one says 2008.
Okay, so maybe.
But hold on, no, but like originally, 1972.
I'm not that old, but I will tell you.
That makes sense. Like, that's why, like, yes, this may have been the book that was on your mother's, and she can verify it for us.
No, she can't. No. You think I'm going to be hiding this episode from her. I don't want her to see any of this conversation going on.
I think your parents are subscribed to our.
That is true. The funny thing is, I will confess this to you. I do have memories of when they were not in the room, like being so curious as a kid and going in there and pulling that book off the bookshelf and opening up to see what was inside.
So, so it's not that traumatizing then. You were like curious about it. You wanted to know.
Oh, I was 100% curious about it, but I was just disgusted that I was like lying on my mom's bed talking to my mom or my dad, and I look over and I see this book. Like, I don't know what age I was, but I knew at that point that obviously I knew that sex was a thing. And so, there's I truly feel like I'm having a therapy session with you right now about my parents and my trauma.
This is amazing. Well, I'm very excited for them to verify if that was the book that they read and if it was helpful, because it's always nice to know if people find these books helpful.
Okay, so follow us at the Spill the Tea Pod on Instagram. Like, subscribe. I know. I knew this would come up, and I'm sorry if I derailed this podcast.
No, I love it. Okay, let's go back to the sex talk. I will tell you. So my sex talk also had a book involved. But my mom decided one day, I was playing in my room. I don't remember how old I was, but it was before I turned like 11. I know that at least because I remember what bedroom I was in. And she came into my room and she was holding like an encyclopedia, like one of those like human body like books, like the old ones that they used to like knock on the door and like give you.
Oh
And
no.
she sat me down on the bed and then she just opened it to like the anatomy of a man and a woman. And she
Hmm.
just, and this was the first time, like, again, I was young. So, like, the first time that I'd ever, like, seen, like, any of that stuff in a picture, right? And so she just, like, opened the book and explained like, the anatomy of humans. And then she's like, I don't even remember. I don't even know if she told me what happens, but she just, like, showed me that and then, like, closed the book and walked away.
It's like,
Like, do you
here's
have
the
any
parts.
questions?
It's
No?
like, here's the body parts. Good luck. Figure it out, girl.
Pretty much, yeah. And then I do remember like the one where like school was supposed to like tell us about the birds and the bees. I actually was sick that day, so I didn't make it. And then like when I
Okay.
was older, sorry, go ahead.
Were you intentionally sick or actually sick? Like, were you trying to skip that class because you knew that was coming up and maybe you didn't want to go, embarrassment, things like that?
So I'm actually wondering if my parents like took me out of school that day. Like now knowing who my parents are and like all that stuff, I do wonder if like some of their like belief system actually like wanted them to like tell me more about it instead of actually letting the school board tell me. But then when I was older, I want to say like grade 7 or 8,
Mhm.
there was a nurse that came into our school and did the banana condom thing. And that was traumatizing. I was like, I don't know if we need to see that. But that was weird.
Yeah, it's funny because so I'm going to assume, based on what you're telling me, that you went to like through the public school system.
I did. I did
Yeah.
go through the public school system, but I was raised with like pretty conservative, like religious parents. And so there's also like that, like the idea of sex and like what I was told about sex is very like convoluted, which is hilarious because then I turned out to be a sex therapist who's on Playboy. So, I
I
mean,
I was gonna say they must love your career now, eh? Black sheep of the family, Maria Arego, right here, right?
oh my
It's
God.
okay. Black sheeps unite, right? Black sheeps unite.
Always. But you
The
didn't do public school. You went Catholic.
I mean, I was a Catholic boy, right? And so, not that I really was a Catholic boy, I'm just joking, but I was put through the Catholic elementary and high school system. Now, the one thing that as soon as we were talking, before doing this episode, when you had spoken about doing this, Beyond the Joy of Sex book, giving me trauma, there was also another book that gave me a bit of trauma. And I did a bit of a deep dive on this. And I would love to know if anyone who's watching this or listening to this podcast right now also knows this book that I'm talking about, Fully Alive. Now, I believe this was a textbook that was only used, I believe, in grade school, like maybe like 6, 7, 8, maybe 9, 10. I don't know, but for sure like that 6, 7, 8, maybe 9, 10. And there was one chapter that whenever because every year you had like a new Fully Alive, right? Because there is that sort of religious Christianity, God sort of
Mm-hmm.
context to the book, right? It's not like a religious book in the sense that it's a Bible, but going through the Catholic school system, like this is what you do. And at the time, and I had to look up what chapter it was. It's chapter 3, and I've done my deep dive, but every time we got to chapter 3, like you'd hear like the giggles or people would be
Mm.
whispering to each other at their desk because chapter 3 was created sexual, male and female, complete with, like you talked about, encyclopedia, diagrams of the male anatomy, the female anatomy, the outline one, right? And explaining what each body part does or how it functions and all this. I'm not going to give you a sex lesson right now. Don't worry about it. Um, but it's funny because I didn't realize that, according to some articles that I found, this book was banned in most schools 2 years ago. Now, there are still some schools, I believe, from what I saw, that are using it, but it's not quite as used as it used to be in the Catholic school system. And the reason being is it's been cited as being, which is interesting, going through Catholic school, although it was years ago, still having those memories, homophobic and transphobic. So, because, I mean, one thing I do know, I mean, there sure as hell was no mention of any other form of identity, sexuality, relationship, beyond male and female. Like, that book definitely gave you the messaging of, in God's eyes, he created male, he created female for reason, for them to come together, have sex, and procreate. And they wouldn't even say have sex, right? But it was like, yeah. So, yeah. So, I mean, if anyone was to ever ask me, like, when you were going through school, did you ever have any education on what that meant to be lesbian, gay? I mean, let alone transgender? Like, absolutely not. That wasn't really something that was, that came up. Definitely not at home. Definitely not in the school system. And the other thing I want to say too, so I'm kind of just like going on this little like rant about it, is, really at that time, the only exposure that I would have had to any form of, I don't know, education when it came to gay, like gay sex, not even gay sex, but just like anything that was gay was, you know, if there was anything on TV, like, you know what I mean? Like if there was, I mean, I like, and I mean more so like from an entertainment aspect, right? There was no educate, like I didn't have that access to education, right? I didn't really have that.
I don't think
I don't
anyone
know.
had access though to
Yeah.
that education. Like I think if we think like 80s, 90s and early 2000s, really even up until now, if you're like fully honest with it, because the fact that the Catholic School Board only banned that book 2 years ago kind of shows us how behind we are with sex education. I think
Uh-huh.
we were all kind of left to our own devices. And while some of us had parents that were able to explain sexuality from a very beautiful perspective, other parents really sucked at telling us what the hell was going on. Our schools never taught us anything. So then, unfortunately, what I see, at least in my practice, is a lot of us learned what sex was through pornography, right? And so we're left with, or like Hollywood,
Yeah.
which, and neither of those things
Are great
are
examples,
great
right?
examples because it doesn't give us the reality of what actually happens, right? If you think of pornography, it's like, yeah, great, that's wonderful, but a lot of it is staged. It's not always like equal when it comes to partners, right? There's a lot of beautiful things about pornography and there's a lot of terrible things about it. But then there's Hollywood that like over romanticizes like this passion and lust that people have for each other. And it's like, well, not everyone's built that way. So we were kind of left to our own devices. And the same thing with like any relationship that was queer, we were left with like
God.
will and grace. And then we thought that that's how you had to present as queer. And if you didn't present in that way, was there something wrong with you?
I remember, I mean, obviously, of course, I remember watching Will and Grace, and I obviously thought it was kind of cool that he had the same name that I had. Okay, this makes sense, right? If your name is Will, you're going to be gay. That's just how it goes. How it goes, right?
Amazing.
But the thing was, is that I also remember, do you remember Showcase? Like the network Showcase?
Yeah.
So it was like after like 11 o'clock at night, they would show shows like, I believe it was the original, like the UK version of Queer as Folk. Then later there was, I believe, an American one, which when I was sneaking watching that, I felt like it was like, oh my gosh, like in the basement, like not even like far from recognizing at that point that I was gay, but just like very curious as to what was going on in that show. Or there would be like these foreign movies that I didn't even understand. Like they'd be like speaking Spanish, and then but it would be like I'd be watching it to see what sort of like sex scenes would happen or like what nudity was going on because they're being European films. I do remember this. Like I was so surprised to see gay people on screen or at least actors who were portraying gay couples or even like male nudity. Like it was just something that was not seen. Like it wasn't a big deal to go to see American Pie in the theater. Even at that age, I don't know what age I was, but I was like maybe like I was definitely in my teen years.
Yeah.
And it's like you saw a woman's breasts or you saw her butt, right? But it's like you never got to see male nudity, right? So it was kind of like I and it's so funny. It's not like I intentionally was like, okay, like I mean, maybe intentionally after I knew that they were on at a certain point in time. It's like, okay, everyone have a good night. Will's going down to the basement. Actually, that sounds really bad. I want to put it like that, but like that was those. It's crazy. honestly, it's funny to think that those were some of my first experiences with um that
Sexuality, sex, all of it. Yeah.
the
Isn't that
closest I
crazy?
ever, because I get this question sometimes, like, when I had come out, people would ask, so do you have anyone else in your family that or are aware of is gay? Like, did you have someone that you could like ask these questions to
Mm-hmm.
or whatnot? What I will say is that in my immediate family, I didn't necessarily know of anyone who had told me that or that was public knowledge. However, I remember like on my other side of the family, my aunt's brother who would only come to events every so often. And I mean, he either showed up with another man or he showed up with this like fabulous Black woman. And, I later found out that she actually worked, I think she actually did some work like on TV, like working for Marilyn Dennis or something like that. And then it was like my aunt said later on, like after I had come out to her, she's like, well, like she was just telling me how much she loved me and all this sort of thing, right? And we had our inclinations, but like thank you for sharing with us. And then she's like, you know how we go, you know how it is here, everyone's invited. Like my brother shows up, sometimes he shows up with a guy, sometimes he shows up with a girl. We don't care as long as he shows up. So, but I mean, that my point of sharing that little story is that I mean, I didn't necessarily have a lot of, like I think most people, education, to
Mhm.
anything beyond heterosexual sexuality.
Yeah, well, it wasn't allowed, right? I mean, if we're thinking about like the 90s and the early 2000s, if we couldn't even get a straight answer about heterosexual sex, we were not getting a straight answer about queer sex. Like there's no way. And we're just now like scratching the surface, right? Of like being able to talk about these things and having people be able to say these words out loud without like giggling, right? Or like being embarrassed. It's like you all do it. Like you all have sex, you all have this like anatomy, we all have a sexual identity. And it's so sad that we were still in a way very repressed when it comes to that part of our sexuality and we're not allowed to talk about it. And I wish our parents would have done a better job because I do think that a lot of the work that I do around sex therapy is because we were not educated and we had to learn on our own and we learned the wrong things, unfortunately. And that's not always our fault. Like, I think as
Yeah.
parents, we also have a responsibility to teach our kids every part of ourselves, right? And sexuality is such a giant piece of our identity. And yet it's kind of forgotten because it's taboo.
And the thing is like, I don't know. And I always say this, and I've said this a number of times, in different mediums over the years. I'm not a parent, right? I do not have kids. I'm not in charge of kids. All of these things are probably great things because, that would probably not be good for anybody involved. But what I will say though, is I think that often society will come down on younger people for being, say, being promiscuous or, you know, whatever, anything that they do that is sexual. It's like, they'll get that bad reputation for that bad rap. Like, why is someone being promiscuous? Why is someone acting out sexually? Why are they not, respecting their bodies or whatever at a certain age or following a certain agenda, right? Like whatever the supposed agenda is. I mean, if they're not given the proper tools, of proper education for all of these things, you know, can you really put that on someone young, someone 15, like, this sort of a thing, right? I think,
Mhm.
you can't be expected to know how to do anything in life without those tools and without that, information. So I just think that that's not fair. And then, things happen, right? I mean,
Mhm.
listen,
Yeah.
like I've talked about this a number of times, coming out later, like in life myself. I'm not saying that I would have came out earlier if I in grade 6 Catholic school I was told about gay sex. I mean, yeah, that would have just been something. But it's like, I mean, I feel like the parents of that time too would have had an issue with that, right? That it would have been like, oh, can you imagine that, like in the 90s? Okay, we're gonna tell people about gay and lesbian intercourse. Yeah,
No,
like
oh my gosh, no. But
right?
it's also it's so sad though, because now I hear like all the messaging that we did get right around like shame or like
Mhm.
I've had people say like they waited until marriage to have sex because they were scared that they'd get pregnant. It's like sex doesn't equal babies, and yet a lot of us got that messaging, right? Or that sex was for adults and not for like younger adults or teenagers, right? And like I still hear it a lot where even people are just like, oh, like kids don't explore their sexuality until later. And I'm like, actually, they start when they're toddlers. And when I say that, people are like appalled that I like have the balls basically to say that out loud.
Yeah.
But it's true. Like we all start exploring our sexuality when we're babies and it evolves. And although they don't understand it fully, there's a moment where they start understanding it and then it kind of continues. And even now, like when I talk to parents and they're just like, well, my kid's not going to explore like porn until they're older. And I'm like, actually, the average age right now is 7 to 8 when they've
For
like
porn.
discovered, yeah, when they discover it. Because if you think about it, the access that they have to tablets,
Mhm.
computers, phones,
Uh-huh.
is not what we had. It took us a long time to discover those things because we didn't have it. We had dial up, like, right? Or we had those like stupid pop up videos that came
Oh
up
my
and you're
god.
like trying to like
Oh
close
my
it
god.
before somebody comes in the room, right?
You know
Now
what's so
they
yeah.
have it everywhere.
I remember, so this is I'm really dating myself here, but I remember my dad buying one of those cable boxes off of somebody that he knew that you could, if you put it on, you can get like all like I don't mean necessarily porn yet. It's like you would get like the movie channel, or you would get I think we wanted to watch like Woodstock 94 or something,
Mhm.
right? And so that's what it was like, okay, you know what, my dad would pay like, I'm guessing $50 for this box as compared to buying it off of like a pay channel for like $300. But I remember when we would have friends over, like after this, we still had the box, and it was like we didn't even necessarily get the channel, but we'd be in our basement watching almost like, you know, like the blue screen of the channels that you didn't get. And I remember, this is so bad, but I remember me and like a few of my male friends and like one or two female friends all sitting down in the my parents' basement watching this. I'm revealing way too much about my adolescence on this episode. And one of my girlfriends, who was very like, I love her, we're still really good friends, but she was a little proper, a little prim and proper, you know? And when she saw the outline of, you
Oh my
know,
God.
a penis, she was like, oh my God, like I've never seen a penis before. I'm like, well, you have now, hun.
That's amazing. I love that you had a porn viewing party. That is basically what you had. You had a pornography viewing party in your basement. And if your parents are listening to this episode, they're going to be like, oh my God, my son. But we did. That's how we had it. So now there's access to everything, right? Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I mean,
Oh my
do you like? I don't know if you want to share, because apparently you're not as unhinged as I am. But do you remember the first time you saw like a an adult movie? I guess like
yeah, I think I had like like a relatively same experience as you did, and I think a lot of us in like our age range would say
uh-huh.
that we had the same. For me, it was like I couldn't sleep one night. I went and was watching television, and like
Yeah.
before, if you're younger than us, you won't remember. But when you're like clicking the remote, which seems like
Clicking the remote. Let's clarify that you were clicking the remote.
the remote. I was clicking the remote and like going like up in channels. And then you got to a certain point where it was like the squiggly lines, right? The static, right? And then sometimes it would like come in or out. And like, yeah, that I think that was my first experience. But what's funny though is because back in the day, pornography was very different too, where it was like an actual movie, like it was an actual like storyline. Do you remember those?
I
I
mean,
think
you know, we're not talking like Oscar winning here, right? This is
no.
very like
Oh my
B
God.
level, you know.
No,
Yeah.
not at all. But I remember thinking that the main actress was like falling in love with this guy and I was like, "Oh, it's like a love story." And then all of a sudden I'm like, "It's not a love story anymore. That is like full nudity. Like this is pornography. This is not a love story." But I remember that being, yeah, because we all did that, right? You stay up late, you're like in your basement, you're clicking like the remote and you're just like looking for stuff. And then all of a sudden the squiggly lines come up and you see things, right? And you get curious about what's going on. But now you just look at your phone and you've got access to the entire world. So I
You can,
can't even imagine what these kids are like experiencing when it comes to that, the overload. Because we had to wait, right? Like you had to wait to see porn, or you had to wait until like your computer loaded
oh my
and
God.
not froze, right? Like very different experiences.
The amount of viruses on our computer that I blamed on LimeWire when I
Yep.
think I really, I mean, I really know why I blew up so many computers back in like the late '90s, I guess, right?
Yeah.
It's just like, oh my God, right?
Wow. Okay, let's
Especially
get
at that point too, where I'm like, I know what I remember thinking a couple times, like, I know what I'm looking at, but like, does my friend who's over fixing my computer, like, can they see what I was looking at?
Oh, well, I mean, yes, I think
But I mean,
so.
especially like, think about someone who wasn't out, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
So
that would have
either
been
like
scary.
some like these people who fixed my computer kept some pretty good secrets over the year,
Their
or they
lips
just
were sealed.
their lips were sealed. Their lips were
Amazing. Well,
sealed.
thank you to all those people that fixed your viruses and were okay with what you were looking at. Okay, let's get to the spill the tea question.
Yes.
Okay. Hi, Will and Maria. I'm a single dad of a 12-year-old daughter, and I'm trying to figure out how to have the talk. I want her to be informed and feel safe asking me things, but I also don't want to overstep or make it awkward. How do I start this conversation without scaring her or freezing up?
So you have a father who is obviously caring and loves his daughter, she's 12, right?
Yeah.
I think now I don't know, and I'm really looking for. I'm also answering this question with a question because you're talking about a female. Would it maybe be a good idea to kind of like say to him, is there any sort of like he's a single father, but is there a prominent female figure in her life who could help out with this? Not that maybe the father couldn't be involved, but maybe the father kind of gives the monologue and then kind of passes it on to the female just so that the daughter would feel comfortable in that moment. Because I don't know how, and help me out, but I don't know how many 12-year-old girls would love getting a sex talk from their father. Might be hard enough with their mother, but at least their mother, you know, would
Yeah.
have, I don't know, is that fair? Or like, should the father be able to have that conversation without the awkwardness?
I think all of that is true though. I think what I would say from like from a therapy perspective, I would say that if you're a single dad and you're co-parenting and there is a mom involved and mom is also like a guardian and a co-parent with you, I would say that the first conversation that actually needs to happen is between mom and dad in order for them to have the conversation perhaps together or like manage what both of their expectations are. Because I think the thing is like if you are divorced, the child is still both of yours and you both should be able to co-parent healthily enough to talk about these things together. So
Mhm.
I would say that I would ask this dad to talk to mom first and then come up with a plan. Obviously, if mom's not there, then yeah, then it's on dad to do it. But if there is a mom or another dad or whatever it is, I think that it needs to be a co parenting conversation. I would say that first. I do love that they don't want to overstep, that they don't want to make it awkward. My advice always to parents when they want to have like the talk or they want to bring up sex is actually to start it more from a place of like curiosity and a place of like asking questions instead of coming with like the like PowerPoints and the point, like the outline, and like, this is what we're going to talk about. No, I would actually come from a place of curiosity of like, hey, what are your friends talking about? What are you hearing at school? What are your teachers teaching you in health class? Do you have any questions about that? Have you been feeling any changes in your body that you want to talk about? Like, come from a place of like knowing where they are first, because I think one of the things that our parents, I think, failed at was assuming we knew nothing
Right.
instead of coming with curiosity and being like, hey, what do you know? Are you already sexually active? Did you already learn this? Have you watched porn? And now I'm like 10 years behind in like what's going on, right? I
Yeah.
think I would come from a place of that, of like, don't get scared to ask, just ask questions, just be curious and open. And when your child does share something, don't don't take that personally. Like, don't don't feel offended by your child knowing something that you may not have taught them, or that they may be a bit more far advanced than you expect them to be. But I would always say come from a place of like curiosity that will make them feel safe, and also watch for their cues of when they're ready to talk about it. Because like our kids say things, right? So if you're listening and you're attuned to your child, they will bring things up. They will say like, oh, like this is really weird. This person had like this joke the other day. If it's a sexual joke, like grab onto that little seed and be like, oh, wow, like what did you think about that? Did you find that offensive? What do you think about that language that they used? What language do you use for these things? Like, again, from a place of curiosity and trying to meet them where they're at is always the safest and the most promising for it to be like a good bond between mom and dad and between like the child.
That's amazing. And I agree with everything that you said there. And I also think that as men, I think that men typically are not hardwired in the same way that women are, where they're listening or watching out for a lot of those cues and a lot of those clues. So I think like dads, we have to be a little more, and I'm sure there's lots of great dads out there who are aware of that, but I just, any guy that I know who's in a relationship is maybe not always listening to his partner and kind of picking up on those signals, picking up on those cues. So if you have a child who's going through adolescence or just about to go through adolescence, like you definitely have to turn up the volume a little bit. And so when they say something to you, A, you have to listen, and B, if they say something around, sexuality, identity, sexual intercourse, like don't shame them, especially if they're going to be opening up about it. Like even that you might not be seen as shaming them, like don't be like, oh, like where'd you learn that from? And like almost don't place that judgment on them, because if you do that, I always say this, I'm not a parent, but they're likely not going to come back to reveal or share more with you. You have to really hold on to those moments and say, you know what? Okay, cool. Like they actually are opening up to me. Even if on the inside you're like, oh my God, my daughter did what? Like, what did she do on Friday night? That's why she wasn't home at 11 o'clock or whatever it was. You have to be aware of that. And just, she's growing. Your daughter, your son, your child is growing and they're evolving, and you have to be ready to embrace it. And that's what you signed up for when you're a parent. Like they weren't going to stay 3 years old forever.
Exactly. And I agree with you. I think especially obviously in adolescence, you're listening for those cues. But I would also argue that if there are parents out there that are listening that have toddlers or even like younger children, you have to start at that age too, right? Like naming the body parts, naming sensations, talking about what actually is happening in their body, like normalizing it. Because if you normalize sex and if you normalize our bodies and you normalize like the things that are going in our head or even like the things that we're feeling, then again, like you just said, we've created a safe place for them to come to us instead of placing judgment and shame and guilt, which is what us millennials grew up with. But then they want to come and it's like, oh my gosh, mom, I felt this. What do I do with it? And it's like, oh, wow, let's talk about it, instead of like, how dare you feel this way? Sex is for marriage. You're going to go to hell. Like, no, not great. Not really like the best message to give your child. So I do think like we need to remain open and safe and curious and put our misconceptions about sex at the door and then deal with those. Like go talk to someone, because we can still learn about sex. We can still grow and evolve and ask those difficult questions that we didn't get a chance to ask when we were younger. You can still ask them now. Like I do sex therapy with adults that are in their 60s, 70s, and 80s that are still asking questions about their sexuality, and they can still learn and evolve who they are sexually. It doesn't end, and it shouldn't end.
And the thing is you also, I think, will enter different sort of eras of your life where you're feeling more comfortable in your own skin, whether that's with yourself, with somebody else, experimental stages and that sort of thing. Take that for what it is. And you're just gonna, I think as you get older, some people maybe are comfortable right from the beginning, but other people kind of work through those things, maybe in therapy, maybe in sex therapy. And then they are older, or they are, you said 60s and 70s, you're still talking about these things in your very office, which is like, some people might be hearing this right now being like, what? Like, how are they asking you those questions at that point? But, you think about the context there and think about, what if we're talking about what it was like in like the 90s, in the early 2000s, like imagine what that would have been like in the 50s or the 60s, right? Like that would have been that wouldn't have even been a conversation, right?
No.
And I think the thing is too is like, I don't know if that was your last sip or not, but the one thing that I'm thinking about for my last sip is don't be afraid to ask questions, because if you're thinking about it, many people have before you. And even if you're not comfortable talking to your parents or a guardian about it, there are resources that are out there, such as therapy, such as sexual health clinics. There is resources and information online, but as we always say, and there are credible sources, just make sure they're credible sources. Or even if it's, someone that you trust within your family who is a little more wiser than you and has been through some of these things. If you have that relationship with that person and you feel comfortable opening up to them, it doesn't necessarily have to be your parent, right? If it is your parent and those conversations open up, I don't know, I'm not a parent, but I think that just make sure it's someone that you're comfortable with sharing these things with. And as long as you're not being harmed, or as long as you're not being hurt, that trust will be there. And, that's an important bond.
Yeah, I love that. It's true. Forming that bond with anyone, right? Like a mentor, a friend, a teacher. Of course, obviously, like maintaining those healthy boundaries, but talking about these things, being curious and opening up to all of us. Like, I think everyone needs to open up about this thing. Like, it goes back to what we were saying at the beginning. Sex doesn't have to be a taboo topic. We're allowed to explore and be curious about it, and we should be allowed to. So, I think the more we talk about it and the more we talk about it in a healthy, safe way, we create that for the next generation. And I think I'm really proud of that we're doing that for the future generation. I would say that's my last sip.
I love that. I love that. Well, you know what? This has been such a fun episode of the Spill the Tea podcast. If you're not already doing so, make sure you follow us on socials at the Spill the Tea Pod. Subscribe so you get notifications when we drop a new episode, which we do every week, by the way. And give us a rating. Not 1 star, but 5 stars. we appreciate you and thank you for listening. And that's the tea.
That's it for this episode of Spill the Tea. If you loved what you heard, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and follow us for more candid conversations. Got a burning question or topic you want us to cover? Slide into our DMs. We're always here to spill the tea. Follow us on socials at the Spill the Tea Pod, at Will Nash on Air, and at Sex Off the Pedestal.